Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, our first business support program webinar of 2026. My name is Ashley Shorey-Mills, Supply Chain Engagement Director here at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. And today we're going to set the scene really for quality. A massively important part of the Sizewell C project. And as always, these webinars are really geared around those subjects and those things that matter to both the project and its major contractors, but also the local and regional supply chain. So you're going to hear from myself as well as some of the experts from Sizewell around this very important area. Next slide, please. So to give a bit of a flavour, you'll hear from myself first of all, bit of an overview, bit of an update on a few things. Also, there's some new names and some new businesses signing up to our webinars all the time. So we like to make sure everyone's got the most up-to-date information they need on our role and the work we're doing on Sizewell C. Then you will hear from Jainesh, Darcy and Alex, all from Sizewell C, to talk about the various aspects of this project and the important updates you're going to need to consider around the area of quality monitoring. And then, as always, we have our Q&A at the end. We encourage, as we always do, please make sure all questions you want, get them into the Q&A function, which you'll find at the top of your screen. If questions do find their way into the chat function, we'll always try and dig them out. Helps us massively, though, if you can put them in Q&A. Certainly questions to do with today's subject would be massively appreciated, but as always, any questions you have around the Sizewell C project, around our work within the chamber or anything at all, then please do let us know. You know what, we love the Q&A function through these webinars, so we're always happy to answer as much as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So just to give a quick brief overview, as we always like to, on the chamber and our role, just as a reminder, you know, who is our team? Who are the Suffolk Chamber Supply Chain Engagement team? You know, we sit as part of the 6th largest chamber in the UK. Suffolk Chamber of Commerce are well respected across the chamber network, and there's a team of 7 of us dedicated to the Sizewell C project, and that's particularly supporting those local and regional businesses. Currently now on our portal we have almost 3,000 businesses, combined employing 1.25 million people, which is an incredible statistic when you consider the strength of businesses across the East. And it's there primarily for the focus on supply chain, but also then supporting around subjects of skills, social value, community engagement, and so on. Really about making sure that we've got the best possible supply chain that is fit for projects such as Sizewell and others across the East. Next slide, please. Now, of course, it wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about obviously what Sizewell's aims are. You know, fundamentally we're doing this job because of Sizewell's key aims, and you'll see some of them on there, and some of these will be very familiar to many of you if you've been on our webinars before. But we have to ensure this project is delivered on time, on budget, with zero harm. That is Sizewell's overriding aim, and whilst doing that, to do some good. And we know about the commitments on the supply chain spend, hence we're doing this today. Huge numbers on jobs, and obviously to do with the future when it comes to net zero and energy security, but doing it in a way that is not just delivering on time, on budget, doing, as I say, as much good as possible in those regions most impacted by Sizewell, or those most that stand to benefit from projects such as Sizewell C and the civil nuclear sector more broadly. Next slide, please. Fundamentally, that is obviously done through Sizewell C's ESG and social value themes. This is quite a familiar slide to many of you. You'll know that our role sits comfortably within goal 1. You know, that piece of UK content compared to Hinckley. They want to get at least 70% of the UK supply chain construction spend spent through UK-based businesses, which is an increase on what has happened down at Hinckley, but by prioritising local businesses first and then moving to regional, so those in the east of England, and also those in the other MOU regions of the North and Wales, and then looking national to really increase that UK spend, but also focus on a more localised level as much as possible. Next slide, please. This is that commitment broken down. So 4.4 billion has been committed to the east of England through construction, so through the supply chain in the construction phase of Sizewell C. You may have seen recently, just before Christmas, we worked with Sizewell to put the latest figure out, which was 941 million has now been spent in the region, and of that 581 million in Suffolk alone. So we're already seeing fantastic inroads being made. What's also quite important to point, you know, that was only the tier 1 spend, so those directly awarded contracts to Sizewell C. That doesn't include the vast majority of local businesses who actually are working through the supply chain at tier 2, 3, 4 and below. So actually we know that the real impact is even greater than that, but it's a great start, and it's part of that mission that we have to ensure that 4.4 billion is achieved, exceeded, but in the right way for the East of England. Next slide, please. And of course, when we talk about the East of England, again, just as a reminder, yes, we are Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, but on the Sizewell project, we are representing all 6 companies of the East. There is naturally a bigger commitment to Suffolk because of the location of Sizewell, because of the types of trades that may be required on site. But from our role, it doesn't matter whether you're in the west of Bedfordshire or the east of Suffolk. We will support you and help you unlock the opportunities that are on Sizewell C. And we work very closely with other business organisations, obviously our fellow chambers across all of those other counties and other major stakeholders, to ensure that that message is being heard and listened to across the whole of the region. Next slide, please. And obviously our priorities fit into these key areas. So we still want to focus on that local. We've always said it's important we get local people working on this project, important we have local businesses employing local people. That's the kind of holy grail, that we can ensure we have the skills to see this project through, but also skills that we then need and want post Sizewell C construction, but also that can then suited for all the other nationally significant infrastructure projects that we have in this region. We want to keep the opportunities focused on the local and regional economy, but sometimes that is also by working together. You know, those businesses traditionally you may have competed against, how we can support you in working together to deliver on a project of this scale. It's a critical part to ensure the success. Next stage, please. And we want to ensure that there has to be a legacy. 4.4 billion, you know, it'd be lovely if we did 8 billion, let's say, for example, but there's no point doing all that extra if all of that money then post construction disappears. It's vitally important that we have a legacy befitting Suffolk and the East of England post Sizewell C construction, to ensure that we don't get boom and bust, to ensure that we can continue to take advantage of all the other national projects that are happening, and to ensure that we have a business landscape that is fit. So importantly is the bottom point that we often talk about. It's about facilitating that sustainable and proportionate growth. We will help you as a business understand where you fit into the supply chain, and I'll talk about that on a future slide, but how you need to behave within that position within the supply chain, the things you could be doing to improve your business, to move up through the supply chain, but in a slow and gradual way, so that you get full benefit without the pain and without the bad experiences that obviously we want to learn lessons from. Final slide on this bit. And of course, we have to be key on this is part of the environment. Yes, Sizewell is critical to the UK government's 2050 net zero agenda, but also it's about the whole supply chain decarbonising. How can we support both the project decarbonise as much as possible through construction, but bring innovation and ideas and best practices to the fore, showcasing local businesses and in helping local businesses to decarbonise themselves, their own fleets, their own services and their own deliveries. Next slide, please. 2 key things, obviously our portal. Many of you today will have signed up because you're already with our portal. It's so important. Every single business, if you're in the East of England and you want to work on this project, to engage with us through this platform. So sizewellcsupplychain.co.uk is the portal, and you will have noticed since September, obviously we've updated all of the question set that we ask people. So if you're a business that's signed up today and you haven't visited the portal for a few months, can I urge you, if you take nothing else away from today, to get back onto the portal, to update with all of your details, especially about telling us and answering the questions around essential standards, because the idea of those is to help you prepare yourselves as best you can. But also you'll find links to all of our webinars and other events and news and support, including on the support function, all the previous recordings of the business support program webinars, and that's where this one will land as well. Next slide. And of course, the other platform is the opportunity portal for Sizewell C. So compete4.com/Sizewell C, all competitive opportunities for this project will be hosted on that platform. You will see there's a couple more last week, there's a couple more going on this week. There's consistently opportunities going on there, and importantly now on the pipeline tab you will start to see the forward look of potential opportunities coming on, but also where those contracts have been awarded to help you as a business understand where your engagement needs to be. Next slide, please. And when I talked earlier about where you fit within the supply chain, it's important, and we're doing this more and more, of the education of how a project like Sizewell works. For the vast majority of you on the call, the vast majority of those 3,000 businesses on our portal, you'll never win a contract with Sizewell direct, but that's not something to be afraid of and to be scared of. On a project the size of this, the size of the contracts, it's about understanding where you fit and who you need to be talking to, and probably most importantly, when you need to be talking to them. So very much we work incredibly closely on a day-to-day basis with the alliances, with Sizewell and all of their tier ones to unearth and understand where those opportunities are coming forward, to then help you as the tier 2, tier 3 and so on suppliers know who you need to be talking to, when you need to be talking to them. And in an ideal world, we then help to create that engagement platform between the two to make it as easy as possible for you to talk to the right people at the right time. Next slide, please. And I talked about essential standards earlier. This gives a bit of a flavour, but the whole idea of essential standards is that it will help you understand what good looks like. Not every business need to tick every single box to work on this project, but if you understand the breadth of what is expected of the supply chain, then at least you can start to look and go, right, as a business, what proportionate steps can we take? What do we want to do? How do we want to improve as a business? So it gives you a bit of a to-do list. It gives us a to-do list with you, and it will help us unearth the various aspects of support that are required. So again, by businesses going on and answering those questions on the essential standards, what it'll also do is it'll inform what future business support programs we do, what workshops we do, and where we can work with our local authorities and people like Sizewell around funding and grants and support for the local and regional businesses that are interested in Sizewell C. Next slide, please. And of course, that procurement process is another key thing that we will help you understand, both from expression of interest via Compete For. Currently is that first step. Still, most procurements can take anything from 6 to 9 months. It's a long process and it's a hard process, but it should be on a project like this. But again, that's where, for a lot of businesses, actually understanding that you sit underneath this process as part of the supply chain. But at each of those steps on this procurement process, we're working with Sizewell and its tier 1 contractors to understand the reasons why businesses are not being successful. To again, help you as a business understand how you can improve and take that step forward so that in future, if you are bidding again, you'll have more chance of success. Next slide, please. And just as a quick view, you know, we always like to show how things are going. So this gives an idea on the site. Hopefully get a new image soon that will help showcase that even better. I urge everyone at all times, if you ever want to have a little look, just look at Google Maps and look at live view, and you start to get an idea for the size of the site now, the flavour of the way the development is taking place. And certainly if you don't already, if you sign up to the all supplier webinars that we host bi-monthly with the Sizewell C commercial and delivery teams, then generally speaking, we always show the drone footage and the most up-to-date imagery of what's happening on site. And it is vast and it's exciting. And there's huge amounts of steps being taken forward. Next slide, please. And of course, off-site, again, if any of you are local, you'll be aware of the impact. And certainly through 2026, every little point you see on here is major infrastructure projects that are happening to support Sizewell. So the new roads, rail, sea infrastructure, and park and rides. And the aim through 2026 is that all of these get completed so that come 2027, big dig, you know, dig the big hole on the main site to be able to infill it, backfill it, and then start to build the nuclear power plant can happen. So 2026 is very much a year of finishing Friday Street roundabout, the Oxford roundabout, the bypasses, and so on. So the stretch of the impact of Sizewell is vast, but of course that brings even more opportunities to the supply chain. Next slide. Perfect. I thought that was my last one. So at this point, I will hand over to Jainesh, and he will start to take you through the first steps regarding some of the quality. Jainesh. Oh, just make sure, Jainesh, you there?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, there you go.
There was an interruption in Microsoft Teams for a moment.
Oh, fine. Excellent.
Hello.
Thank you. So I'll hand you over. Thank you.
Okay, so this topic is about the Sizewell C quality requirement, and especially we have got our own standard for compliance of the UK nuclear regulator, which is called General Quality Assurance Standard, GCAS, which we Take that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the agenda of this topic is what is GCAS, GCAS overview, then the graded approach, the QA grading, which we treat in the nuclear industry, supplier responsibility and compliance, the main standard, the difference between ISO 9001 and ISO 19443, which is the standard specific to nuclear new build. What is the quality related activities and what are the technical controls and why it is important to avoid any defects in the nuclear power plant? What is the responsibility of the leadership and nuclear safety culture in supplier point of view? Latent defects and case studies, videos and resources for some examples that what latent defect could do in a nuclear power plant, best practices and expert insight. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so GCOS, which is our main standard on which the Sizewell C quality requirements are defined. So that GCOS is defined the rules and obligation of suppliers who are supplying the parts and products and material to nuclear projects, and what are their obligation for quality and safety in nuclear projects. The ISO standard comparison, we will also go through with what is the difference, main difference between ISO 9001 and 19443 in a brief detail, highlighting the main difference and what is the difference in quality management for the nuclear industry supplier. Quality related activities. So what is the main difference? Covers the why the quality related activities are important to maintain nuclear safety culture and compliance. It will, we will also emphasize on the leadership role in to establish nuclear safety culture in the industry, emphasize the importance of a strong safety culture to prevent defects and ensure operational safety. And we will also cover the CFSI, which is the counterfeit fraudulent suspected item, outline the control, prevention measure, and detection practices required to ensure the CFSI item do not enter in the nuclear supply chain. Next slide, please. GCOS overview. GCOS is, as I mentioned, is a general quality assurance standard for adopted in nuclear new build industry in UK, which is based on ISO 9001, ISO 19443, IAEA GSR Part 2, which is an international nuclear body, and also the local organization of nuclear regulator, which is the organization by UK government regulators, and what is the licensing condition requirement 17. This standard is specifically defined to comply with all of the standards, international standards, provide the mandatory quality arrangement to protect nuclear safety, define the expectation for leadership, risk management, documentation, verification, and traceability for all the parts and products made for nuclear construction. The purpose of this specification is to define the quality assurance requirement to be implemented for each QA grade by suppliers and sub-suppliers as defined in their arrangement. So we have got various tiers of the supplier, tier 1 and tier 2, in some cases tier 3 supplier as well. So this standard is applicable to throughout the supply chain, and this standard also define that what are the responsibility to ensure quality and safety for the nuclear power plant. The purpose of this specification is to define the quality assurance requirement to be implemented for each QA grade. So we will go through in detail what is the QA grade mean for supplier and how the QA grades are being defined through the GCAS standard, and what are the quality related activities to be defined for each respective QA grade of the parts and material which is supplied for the nuclear power plant. These requirements are mandatory and are required to be systematically and effectively implemented by suppliers in their supply chain. Supplier may choose to use ISO 19443 Part 18 2018 as the basis of compliance. And in this case, we will replace ISO 9001 and 2015 as the standard. But we are not making ISO 19443 certification as a mandatory as far as the supplier is able to provide the compliance to our own GCOAS requirement. This ISO 19443 certification is not mandatory. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this of the QA grade and graded approach. So in a new build, how the QA gradings are defined. So basically, we provide the book of technical specification to each of our, and in that book of technical specification, we define which parts or components are safety classified, which part and components are important for plant availability or operator health and safety, and which part and component are not safety classified. So based on that, the QA grade 1, QA grade 2, and QA grade 3 can be defined by the supplier. So the QA grade 1 is the component which are safety classified. The safety classified is the highest level of control. Independent verification are mandatory. QA grade 2 is important for safety and availability of the plant operation. So enhance oversight based on the risk. And QA grade 3 is mostly the majority commodity items like as component of the shelf. Basic control must be prevent the CFSI because the CFSI is identified as a major risk for all nuclear new build throughout the world and also within UK and France. So for QA grade 3 component, which are COTS item, still we are expecting our supplier to have enhanced control for CFSI and grading determine the documentation, inspection, hold and witness points. So there are different kind of documentation requirement for each QA grading. Next slide, please. So here is the management difference between QA grade 1, QA grade 2, and QA grade 3 as identified before. The QA grade 1 component, which are mostly the safety classified component, we are expecting full traceability, independent verification, strict configuration control, mandatory ITP hold and witness point, enhanced surveillance. QA grade 2 is the risk-based inspection, documented verification, surveillance depending on the importance to safety and availability. And QA grade 3 is a basic control, certificate of conformity or based on 3.1 allowed, and the CFSI prevention is still mandatory and minimal documentation for QA grade 3 part. So this is the three-tier quality arrangement. Next slide, please. So here are the main supplier responsibility and compliance ask in our GCAS, so which is also applicable to tier 2 supplier. So tier 1 and tier 2 supplier both are mandatory to comply with Sizewell C GCAS and QA grade standard. In that, they need to cascade down all these requirements and our internal standard specification throughout their supply chain. They need to maintain the lifetime quality records, which we call it as LTQR. They should have established NCR management system and they should have risk-based controls within their manufacturing operations. And they should also provide the Sizewell C access for audit, inspection, and surveillance as and when needed. Surveillance and audit, they should have robust surveillance and audit process are essential to ensure adherence to supply chain requirement and allow access to employer, which is Sizewell C in this case, to perform supply chain auditing, inspection, and assessment as and when we require to assess the risk and also identify if there are any major non-conformity issues identified during manufacturing. Management of quality records. It's a simple definition for nuclear power plant. No records means no product. The records are very important. The power plant are built to expected lifetime expectancy of 60 years. And throughout that 60 years, if we want to go back with any particular part and component, the records are very essential for us to make sure there is a traceability, to make sure there is a required quality standard are adopted during manufacturing of that part. And it is also very important for us to comply with UK nuclear regulator ONR's licensing condition 6 requirement. Prevention of CFSI, that is very critical to reduce the latent defect and risk in the nuclear power plant construction operation. And this includes supplier verification, traceability, reporting mechanism, robust inspection process to safeguard nuclear safety and compliance. So we will go through with what can this latent defect uh, impact on the nuclear plant operation. There are a few examples given which very famous and you might be aware of them. And that's why the UK regulator has defined various licensing conditions for every single nuclear new build to follow and their supply chain to follow to avoid any CFSR risk and latent defect risk in the parts and material. Next slide, please. Yeah, so next slide. Yeah, this is the classic main overall difference between ISO 9001 and ISO 19443. So ISO 9001 is a generic QMS standard, whereas ISO 19443 is a nuclear specific QMS standard. ISO 9001 mainly focus on the customer's satisfaction, whereas ISO 19443 is focused on nuclear safety culture. ISO 9000 has got process-based approach, whereas 19443 has got graded approach for safety, which we have defined in the earlier slide. The graded approach for safety QA grade 1, QA grade 2, QA grade 3. And there is extra requirement for traceability and CFSI prevention are defined in ISO 19443. So these are the main key difference between ISO 9001, which is for civil industry, and ISO 19443, which is for the nuclear specific industry. Next slide, please. Yes, so to avoid the latent defect, the ISO 19443 and also G-class of Sizewell C has defined the QRA, quality related activities. And these activities, how the supplier can define the QRA is through the, are there any activities safety significant? There are a few questions they can ask in the DFMEA and FMEA process at the time of the designing of that component. So the QR activities are the main activities whose result cannot be fully verified later. Like as if there are certain type tests or the test, for example, NDT exam verification of welding process. If you do not perform NDT at the right process due to confined space in the nuclear power plant, it is not possible to perform that test at the later stage during operation. These activities must be identified early and included in the ITP early in the design stage. Independent independent verification required for all QRA activities. So like as independent verification is the person who is performing the QRA activity and person who is checking the QRA activity should be independent from each other. It is not like it is a third eye approach. Risk-based control must be applied consistently. So this is, there are uh, how the QRA to be classified, how they need to be verified, that all defined in this slide. Next slide, please. So definition and control of QRA, nature of QRA. QRA are critical tasks whose failure impacts nuclear safety, and in some cases it cannot be verified after completion. I hope that one is clear to everybody. Technical control. So for each QRA activity, there should be defined technical control by supplier. Control includes independent verification, detailed inspection and test plan, oversight by suppliers, suitably qualified experienced personnel. So that's very important. The person who is verifying the QRA activity, they are qualified. Like for example, if there is a welding activity which is identified as a QRA, the person who is checking the welding activity, they are NDT qualified and they have got suitably qualified experience certificates to verify that particular type of the building. Supplier responsibility must identify QRA in quality plan, which is ITPs, inspection and test plan, and obtain approval before starting any quality related activities, and invite employees representative, which is our inspection body for witness that activity. And risk mitigation, learn from industrial experiences. These measures reduce the latent effect and ensure the compliance with quality standards to safeguard nuclear safety. So there are wider nuclear platforms available which share the experience and OPEX and lesson learned of French nuclear new build or US nuclear new build or Korean nuclear new build, and from there industrial learning is very important nuclear industry. Next slide, please. Nuclear safety culture, so which is the key responsibility in leadership point of view for each supplier. Nuclear safety culture means collective commitment prioritizing nuclear safety and conventional safety over the competing goals by organization and individuals. Key component for suppliers are strong safety culture involves transparent communication, continuous learning, challenging attitude, and leadership commitment within supplier organization. So transparency is the key. During the manufacturing of the part, we have got defined witness point and hold point, and our inspection agency will be there to witness that part. But you are responsible for manufacturing 100% quality assured component for nuclear new build. So in case any discrepancy or any non-conformity, it is supplier's responsibility to make transparency in the manufacturing and inform employer, which is Sizewell C, for any kind of flaws and non-conformity to the employer. And importance and regulatory emphasis. So ONR, which is a regulator, they do plan various intervention throughout our supply chain to make sure there is a effective quality assurance and safety culture throughout in nuclear new build supply chain of Sizewell C as well as Hinkley Point C. Next slide, please. CFSI management. Next slide. So CFSI defense model is prepared in our GQuas, that all GQuas requirement must flow down to sub-suppliers, all your tiers, tier 2, tier 3 supplier audit, process verification, material traceability, documentation, inspection. These are part of the CFSI defense model. Include the QA grades, so based on that safety class of the component. Also identify the QRA activity not at tier 1 supplier, but also at relevant tier 3 supplier. If there are any tier QRA activities they are performing, they should have CFSI controls, they should have valid documentation and the opportunity of audits. Use of approved suppliers only. If we are respecting all over tier 1 supplier, they have got approval process of the tier 2 and tier 3. And after that approval audit, only they have got list of approved supplier which need to be submitted to us. Establishment of specific anti-CFSI policy and CFSI training to all the staff and operator of your suppliers. So it's a tier one supplier's responsibility to ensure there is a anti-CFSI policy in place, and also they have got training modules available for their own operator as well as their tier two suppliers. Risk assessment required for procurement and manufacturing, implement design verification, process verification, material checks, and records verification, mandatory reporting of suspected CFSI to Sizewell C, and supplier must monitor sub-supplier compliance regularly. So this is a CFSI defense model identified in our GCOS. Next slide, please. Latent defect and case studies. So next slide. We will go through with some of the classic examples that what the latent defect can cause in the nuclear power plant. So these are some very old latent defects and some of new, and some case studies are provided here that what can latent defect do, and that's why we have got very enhanced GCOA standard as well as all 17 uh, licensing condition requirement implemented by UK government body ONR, and we have got very strict control on our tier 2 and tier 3 supplier to avoid this kind of latent defect. So latent defects are hidden flaws, undetectable during normal inspection, but surface under operational stress condition at later date. That's why we are expecting our supplier to do FMEA and DFMEA, identify all the quality related activities, and implement the technical control at the relevant stage to avoid any latent defect in plant operation. There were there are several examples for Chernobyl, David Best corrosion case, Mahima Unit 3 in Japan for pipe rupture, and Fukushima Daiichi system failures due to design latent defect. We will go in that detail later. Next slide. Videos and resources for this latent defect. Next slide, please. Chernobyl, very famous. Chernobyl disaster, the latent defect of Chernobyl modern safety analysis. So here is the case study of what kind of latent defect caused this Chernobyl disaster. There were flaws in the design, and that design, the most critical latent defect was in the control rods. Their graphite tips initially increased the reactivity before the neutron absorbing portion could enter in the core of the nuclear reactor, and this turned in the emergency brake into gas pedal during the final shutdown attempt. So they couldn't make the effective shutdown in case when the fuel rods were inserting inside nuclear reactor. And there were various latent defect, like as the operational defect, xenon poisoning sensitivity. The reactor was highly sensitive for xenon 135, built up during low power operation, which poisoned the reaction and lured operator into withdrawing nearly all control rod to maintain power. Lack of containment. Unlike the Western reactors, the Russian built nuclear reactor lack of reinforced containment dome, which is now all the Western nuclear reactors are implementing. And without the dome, the nuclear reactor activity and heat was not able to contain inside. And there was a systematic safety culture failure in this case. The critical design flaws were kept secret from operator by Soviet state, and poor training of staff, lack of full of lacked a full understanding of how the reactor would behave under specific test condition. This has caused this incident. Next slide, please. So this is a video to explain what exactly happened. If you play this. Sorry, sound is not coming.
Bear with us, Jainesh. We're just having some fun with Teams this end today. It's doing the same as it did for you, obviously, at the start. So we're just going to get the settings changed. So bear with us. There we go.
The world's worst civilian nuclear disaster took place when a reactor exploded at the Chernobyl power plant in Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union. Present-day Belarus received 60% of the initial fallout. The radioactive cloud spread further to cover most of Europe. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was one of the Soviet Union's most advanced facilities. The first two reactors became operational in the late 1970s. The fourth reactor was the newest, going online in 1983. On April 26, 1986, technicians prepared to test the backup cooling system in reactor number 4. But the routine safety drill went horribly wrong. A nuclear reactor is like a giant steam engine. Uranium fuel rods react to produce a massive amount of heat. That converts water into steam, which drives huge turbines to generate electricity. Control rods are inserted in between the uranium to slow the reaction. And it's crucial for cooling water to be pumped around the core to prevent overheating. But as the test began, almost all of the control rods were removed, and technicians lost control of the flow of coolant. Temperatures soared, and extreme heat began to melt the core. At 1:23 a.m., Reactor 4 exploded. It spewed 8 tons of radioactive debris into the atmosphere. 115,000 people were evacuated from a 30-kilometer zone around the plant. The battle to put out the fires inside lasted for 15 days. More than 500,000 military and civilian personnel were drafted to deal with the accident and its aftermath. 31 of the initial firefighters and plant workers died within days from acute radiation sickness. The toxicity of the radioactive cloud was equivalent to 400 Hiroshima atomic bomb explosions. Crews hastily built a concrete sarcophagus to encase the entire reactor to prevent more radiation from spreading. Inside, there remained 200 tons of radioactive fuel. The remaining 3 reactors continued to operate due to energy shortages in Ukraine. It wasn't until the year 2000 that the Chernobyl complex was completely shut down. With the concrete sarcophagus crumbling, the international community began to build a new confinement structure for Reactor 4. It stands 110 meters tall, higher than the Statue of Liberty, and it's wide enough to fit a ship the size of the Titanic. At a projected cost of $3 billion, construction is scheduled for completion in 2017. One of Chernobyl's iconic red and white chimneys will be dismantled, and a massive steel dome will slide over reactor number 4. The confinement structure is expected to last for at least 100 years.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So this was an incident happened in 1986.
Brian is the best content marketing team lead I've ever worked with.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so there are a few more examples given for the latent defect, like a Davis-based reactor vessel had degradation in USA, and this was about the chemical defect, the invisible acid. The operator believed that because of the reactor head was so hot, any leaked water would instantly evaporate and into harmless dry salt. They didn't realize that under certain conditions, it formed a concentrated liquid acid that could eat through 6 inches of solid carbon steel while leaving a dry crust on the top, high to damage. So it was a weak nuclear safety culture within a system. A NRC task force later found a normalization of deviance. Management and NRC missed the multiple warnings, including the red rust in filters and similar problem at other plants because they prioritized the keeping the plant running over investigating the root cause, and that caused this disaster. So in a summary, any latent defect in part and
Bear with me. Jainesh, you've gone on mute, just to confirm.
oh, sorry.
There you go, you're back.
Uh,
Carry on, sorry.
So that's why a nuclear safety culture is the key in the definition of the our quality standards and effective QI control and technical control to avoid any latent defect in our plant operation, as well as the materials are being supplied to nuclear power plant. Next slide, please. Is the time. This is a 8-minute video which is available on internet. Actually, does the time permit for this?
To be fair, Jainesh, obviously the link is shared, just conscious because obviously we've still got Darcy and Alex as well. What we'll do is then obviously the link is shared within there, so we'll probably do that rather than play this video if that's all right, Jainesh.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Next slide, please. This is another latent defect example of Mihama power plant where the rupture of the pressure pipe happened due to the latent defect in the inspections. So in the inspection schedule, this regulatory check of this pipe were missed by operator, and that caused the pressure pipe rupture in 1976. So these are some examples of the latent defect happened in 1970s and 1980s. After that, the nuclear technology is quite upgraded, and there is a wider scope of lesson learned, and the industrial are implemented throughout the supply chain, and there is a strong regulatory controls are implemented in Western world as well as throughout the world for all nuclear new build to avoid this kind of errors and disasters. Okay, next. Yeah, and that's why in GQuas we have implemented a Swiss cake model, Swiss cheese model, sorry, advanced inspection methods, supplier qualification through audits. So we don't accept part from any non-qualified suppliers. And we are also expecting all over tier 1 and tier 2 supplier, they have got right KPI throughout procurement control to mitigate CFSI risk, traceability system throughout supply chain to avoid any flaws in the material supply, and global standard compliance along with the regulatory compliance. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Handing over to Darcy.
Thank you, Jainesh. So, hi, I'm Alex Vale, and we are here today to talk to you about lifetime quality records. So joining, sorry, 1 second. So during the session, we are going to be looking at, if you just go to the next slide, please. And the next one. Perfect. So what is an LTQR? The legal and contractual frameworks relating to LTQRs on Sizewell C. Why standards and evidence matter when producing the LTQRs. What some of the best practices are. A real-world example looking at the implications of not producing LTQRs correctly. And finally, we're going to be looking at some learning experiences and the improvements we are making to managing records on Sizewell C. Next slide, please. So what is an LTQR? So LTQRs are records that are required by the employer to prove a product, service, asset, and any other work meet the stated requirements. So LTQRs are records that must be retained for the lifetime of the Sizewell C project to demonstrate compliance with the regulatory requirements, including Licence Condition 6. So I know Jainesh did cover briefly Licence Condition 6. So that is where our requirement comes from the ONR. They cover a wide range of document types, such as certificates, drawings, reports, images, and physical samples. LTQRs are essential to maintaining a safe, compliant, and well-documented project throughout construction, operation, and eventual decommissioning. They aren't just paperwork, they are actually critical to nuclear safety, traceability, and regulatory assurance. So yeah, on the screen there you can just see some examples of what would be classed as an LTQR. So next slide, please. So the Office of Nuclear Regulations, ONR, works on a system of regulatory control based on a robust licensing process by which a corporate body is granted a license to use a site for specified activities. So LTQRs are a legal requirement driven by UK nuclear regulation, specifically relating to Licence Condition 6, LC6. Which mandates that accurate, complete, and long-term records must be maintained to ensure nuclear safety, traceability, and compliance throughout the entire life cycle of the project. So record keeping isn't optional, it is a core legal obligation that will underpin nuclear safety, supports any investigations, and ensures that the safety case remains absolutely robust from construction right through to decommissioning. Next slide, please. So why do standards and evidence matter? So again, I know Jainesh has just spoke about quality and you know, some really great cases there as to why this is so important. So it's really important that we do understand what is at stake when LTQRs fall short and to understand why the standards and evidence do matter. If quality records aren't delivered right and on time, there can be a cascade effect across the project that can impact multiple areas. For example, schedule delays in record delivery can hold up key milestones. Rework and late shipments and extended timelines all end up driving up costs of the project. Missing or inaccurate records can compromise the integrity of the design and safety case. Poor record management reflects badly on Sizewell C and our suppliers, impacting trust and reputation. And without complete and verified records, commissioning activities can be delayed or even halted. So it is super important that we do understand what is at stake when LTQRs are not delivered on time and correctly. Next slide, please. So best practice when producing LTQRs. So these are some of the things that we sort of stand by at Sizewell C. When producing LTQRs, it's important that we follow the guidelines in place for best practice, as this ensures authenticity, traceability, and compliance when producing records. So we have some examples of these best practices on the following slides. Again, these are just examples. Signatures must be unique, verified, and represent proper authority. Copy and paste signature images are really not acceptable. Ink signatures on original documents are valid as long as the scanned version is a verified copy. For electronic records, suppliers must ensure records are traceable via a unique identifier, fully legible, and so good record keeping is intentional, controlled, and fully traceable, which is a core requirement for producing compliant LTQRs. Therefore, records must be securely stored and protected from unauthorized amendment. Filing systems and controls must be in place, and records should not be left unattended. Forms must be properly completed with no pre-filled fields. Blank pages should be marked intentionally left blank, and the use of NA should be followed up with justification, and signatures must be justified if missing. Next slide, please. So correct and controlled completion of LTQRs is essential. Records must be clear, permanent, traceable, and free from ambiguous or unofficial markings. So for example, ditto marks are prohibited. All writing must be fully legible. Signatures must be permanent and include full identification, name, role, organisation, date. PP on behalf of signatures do require prior approval. Pencil or non-permanent pens cannot be used. Errors must be crossed through once with changes dated and signed, and correction fluid tape is not allowed. So LTQRs really must be produced with a high standard of integrity and permanence. So following the clear rules about how records are written, corrected and authenticated is paramount. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass you over to Darcy, who's going to continue talking about lifetime quality records on Sizewell C.
Thank you for that. So we have a real-world example here that highlights some of the implications of not producing LTQRs correctly. So Takata was a major supplier of automotive safety parts, and for years they were considered reliable. This changed when it was discovered that their airbag inflators could explode during deployment, which sent bits of flying metal into vehicles. The fallout from this was massive, with at least 27 lives lost and hundreds more people were injured. There were over 100 million vehicles that had to be recalled across the globe. So Takata ended up having to file for bankruptcy in 2017 as they faced billions in legal costs and recall expenses. And the reputational damage extended well beyond Takata as it affected their automotive clients too. So looking at that from a records and traceability point of view, we can dive into what went wrong. So first off, the quality records were either incomplete or inaccurate, and in some cases there was data missing, and in others the data had actually been falsified. So that made it incredibly difficult to get to the root of the problem. There was a lack of traceability, so documentation was so poor that identifying which batches of the vehicles were affected, became nearly impossible. And finally, issues weren't escalated quickly enough, so problems that were known internally weren't properly recorded, which delayed any kind of corrective action. So the Takata case is a reminder of what's at stake when quality is compromised, but it does also give us a clear roadmap for how to do better on our project. So by embedding quality into our LTQR processes and into our culture, we can protect lives, reputations, and also the future of Sizewell C. So next slide, please. So moving on to some of the lessons that can be applied onto our project, it's important that we are clear from the outset. So every supplier and contractor should know exactly what records are needed, when they're due, and how they should be formatted. Regular site visits and ongoing reviews of records aren't just good practice, they are essential. They help us catch issues early and stop them from becoming bigger problems further down the line. And every record should be traceable back to its source with proper metadata and version control, making sure we maintain accountability and compliance. We want to set our suppliers up for success, so that means giving them the tools, training, and the guidance they need to manage LTQRs properly from day one. And finally, we need to build a culture where accurate record keeping is valued and also people feel safe to escalate issues to ensure that we are getting things right. So moving on to the next slide, please. So Sizewell C has been working closely with Hinkley Point C to ensure that we are continuously improving how we manage records on our project. So by embedding quality, structure, and early engagement into our record strategy, we're setting ourselves and also our suppliers up for success. So one of the key issues with records management at HPC was the delay in managing of the records. There wasn't a clear understanding across the contracts of what needed to be delivered and when, and there was also a lack of resource in place at the beginning. So in roughly late 2018, a team was brought in to support the management of records at HPC, but unfortunately by then, many of the contracts were already well underway and records had already been submitted. So that meant we were playing catch up from the start. So at Sizewell C, we've taken those lessons learned and launched a specific LTQR strategy. that focuses on progressive record generation, meaning the records are created during construction and not left until the end. The quality team have been involved in the management of records since day one, and they're actively engaging with suppliers and contractors early on. They're delivering presentations on LTQR processes and also partitioning strategies, making sure everyone understands the importance of getting it right from the beginning. And by working closely with our suppliers, the team can guide them through their first LTQR submission before anything goes into Team Center, which is the management system. That way, expectations are clear and future records are far more likely to be right first time. Next slide, please. So another challenge at HPC was the lack of clarity between NMB and the suppliers. Expectations around LTQRs weren't always well communicated, which led to inconsistent submissions and delays in meeting compliance standards. On top of that, many suppliers were under-resourced when it came to record management. Some didn't have dedicated personnel or systems in place, which made it difficult to maintain quality and traceability throughout the project. So at Sizewell C, we've taken a more proactive approach to this. The quality team is engaging regularly with suppliers to monitor quality and ensure records are reviewed progressively throughout the contract lifecycle. The quality team have created a focus to building capability and confidence by providing clearer guidance and better support to help suppliers manage and submit their records effectively and also on time. Next slide, please. So just to summarize on that, we hope that if you didn't know before, you now know why lifetime quality records are legally required under nuclear regulations and the critical role that they play in ensuring safety, project assurance, and regulatory compliance throughout Sizewell C's life cycle. And hopefully you are aware of the consequences of poor record keeping and the best practices suppliers must follow to produce accurate, traceable, and right first-time records. And hopefully we have demonstrated some of the lessons learned from HPC and how Sizewell C has implemented a more proactive, structured approach to the LTQR management. Thank you.
Darcy, brilliant. Thank you so much. And also, obviously, thank you to Alex and Jainesh as well for your slides. And obviously, apologies, we've had a couple of technical issues today. You can tell it's our first one of the year where teams obviously didn't like us. But look, a few key points to raise on that, and in no particular order, because anyone knows me knows I scribble lots of stuff down. But just on what Alex and Darcy just touched on there, I think, you know, lifetime records, I know there's a lot of talk today around quality and around the services and products you're going to be supplying in to projects like Sizewell C. But actually, you know, lifetime records are key across so many different sectors, whether it's safety, whether it's compliance. You know, it's important that, you know, accurate record taking and having the ability to be audited and inspected and you know, no fear of that, I think is critically important. And it's certainly an ongoing message that we're putting across to the supply chain. And hopefully you heard at the end through everything you've heard today, but I think it was kind of surprised right at the end by Darcy that actually Sizewell's there to support you, as are their tier one contractors. There is an appreciation that a lot of this will be new for more localized, maybe more of the SME suppliers on the call today and through our database, that actually it can be quite daunting, but actually that support is there, that support and guidance, whether that's through the work that we do or actually those people wanting to award you the contracts, those tier one contractors, people at Sizewell, because it's much better that actually we work together and focus it more in a proactive sense. Work together to get it right in advance than actually have to do something wrong and then unwind it. Many of you will know, you know, the mantra for nuclear full stop, not just Sizewell, is, you know, do it right, do it once, and that's very much that focus. I think with regards to a lot of the earlier slides you saw from Jainesh, again, most of it, let's be honest, it's around best practice and making sure that everyone understands the requirements that are there. It's important to say, you know, some of the stuff you'll have heard today will be very specialized. It will be very much focused on those doing sort of second half of this project, very much focused on actually the reactors, the examples of some of the kit that would have been put into the likes of Chernobyl and the others. But actually those standards whatever level they need to be, are still vital, whether you are supplying goods into the project that someone else is going to install, or actually, just providing a service yourself on site through site operations and the ongoing management and maintenance of the site. So it's vitally important. But again, we will support you in understanding what level you need to be at. Maybe you just need 9001 as an ISO, like was mentioned earlier, or maybe you do need 19443, that nuclear specialist one. And again, we can support you and help you understand where you fit into that. Also, I know Jainesh spoke a lot about CFSI. If you're not already aware and you didn't join it, we actually did a webinar on exactly this subject with Sizewell last year. So on the 8th of July, it's still on our website. So if you want to dive a little deeper into conformant, fraudulent, suspect items and the ways in which you can manage that in more detail, then please do check out that webinar we did last year. And actually, we're going to be looking at some workshops in the near future on this, because I referenced earlier the essential standards. And one of the questions we actually ask is around the practices you have in place to monitor CFSI within your own workplace. So again, one of those areas where if it's a new thing, if it's an area where businesses are not confident in, we want to be able to support you, and we'll do workshops in these areas. And also, it's been kind of spoken about almost throughout, but actually leadership is key in this. Those standards must be in place, and not just a policy. It has to be evidenced throughout your business. There has to be a leadership and a management leader within this, and it has to run through your whole organization. And we are going to be doing some webinars in the near future. I think one may already be on the website for you, book on, all around leadership and around managing through projects like Sizewell C. Right, so Q&A. Now, there's only a couple of questions. As always, please chuck some questions in. We've got plenty of time. Obviously, if there isn't any, absolutely fine. But there's a couple of questions on there. I'll touch on just in the order on my screen. So maybe Darcy or Alex can probably answer the first one. So are LTQRs from Hinckley being considered towards Sizewell? If so, how?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that one. So as you may be aware, that obviously Sizewell C is going to be a replication of Hinkley Point C. So we are working very closely with Hinkley Point. But obviously LTQRs are, a standalone document for whatever has happened at that moment in time. So they can't really be sort of carried across to Sizewell C. They have to be created all over again, depending on what happened at Sizewell C when the work was being carried out. So yeah, basically, it's sort of a similar sort of thing, but as Darcy sort of touched upon, we are taking lessons learnt from Sizewell, from Hinckley, to be able to then carry them across to Sizewell C to make sure that we're sort of capturing all of those lessons and make sure that suppliers sort of do understand what is required of them from the very, very beginning. So yeah, hopefully that's answered.
Yeah, perfect. I think again, it's like the whole of this project is learning lessons and replication.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So this, obviously, the replication model is often spoken about the design. Obviously, Hinckley is units 1 and 2, Sizewell is units 3 and 4, etc. But actually, whether we're talking our role as a chamber, whether we're talking as Alex just outlined there around, excuse me, I'm going to put this out as paperwork, but referencing and evidencing, it's all about learning, so we don't make those same mistakes. If we could have, even if it worked well at Hinckley, if there's a way we could do it better, if we could go back and do it again, how can we do that? And that's vitally important. And I think that kind of almost part leads on to, and I'll enjoy answering this one, to Garth's question. How can we ensure better engagement from Sizewell C? I know when you're saying staff, I'm assuming you mean the businesses themselves, Garth, to purchase locally rather than take the path of least resistance, i.e. go to where they may be purchased from previous contracts. It is the biggest, I would say, challenge, but it's a challenge felt by ourselves, but also Sizewell and all its contractors. I'm not here to kind of fight their corner for them, because we will challenge Sizewell as a chamber all the time to ensure that there is as much open opportunity for local businesses as possible. Now, for many of you who are anywhere near site will see there is a lot going on. It is incredibly busy, and sometimes there has to be that, probably a better way to put it, but that path of least resistance, because sometimes stuff just has to happen. But what we are ensuring we do as a chamber all of the time is getting more and more opportunities competitively tendered and available directly, but also to increase and with the tier 1 partners. Now, I know many of you will be attending our event we've got in a few weeks' time, and I know you are, Garth, for example, because I double checked when I saw your question to make sure. That is a key example. We are bringing the tier ones together and saying, right, who do you need to talk to? What type of businesses do you want to speak to? And then we invite those businesses along. So it's all about creating the engagement routes that best suit both local businesses, but also at the right time, the tier ones. We could spend all day introducing every business we have, all 3,000 of them, to all 100, 150 tier ones on the project. But ultimately, that would not bring the results that we want to see. So is it working perfectly, Garth? No. Is it working? Yes. And it'll take a bit more time. But the key is continuing to highlight the local businesses in the way we are and create those engagement routes for them, such as the event in a couple of weeks' time and all our other events and engagement. That comes back to that important point of making sure as a business that you are registered on our portal, that we have accurate contact details, and that you represent yourself and answer those questions in the best way possible. You'll be astounded at the amount of businesses that still have not answered the essential standards questions, still don't tell us about themselves, which then doesn't enable us to put you forward when the opportunities do appear. I've got another question. I'd like to understand how the approach from tier 1 to contractors engaged with the Suffolk North supply chain will work in reality. I think I've kind of just answered that, Spencer, if I'm honest. The key is if you as a business are struggling to get anywhere with tier 1 and tier 2, then ultimately just reach out to us. That is what we are there to do. We cannot always give the answers that either you want, or we can't always make that correct introduction at the right time. Sometimes we miss that opportunity. Sometimes it might be too early. But if we can work with you to understand as much about your business as possible, then we can ensure, A, that you're ready for it. So talking about today, making sure that, you might not be needed on the project for another year. What can you be doing now? Can you be looking at your quality, your LTQRs yourself? Is there other things you can be doing in advance to make sure you're in the best place possible? But what we can then also do is make sure that those tier ones that are most relevant, we can find out when they're going to need those services. And like I say, creating events, creating engagements, and that will increasingly happen over time. I get the frustration from local businesses, we genuinely do, but at the same time, this project has still barely scratched the surface, and that's not even a pun to do with the earthworks. It's as much as there is loads of activity on site, as much as there is lots of stuff happening. And again, if you live in East Suffolk, you see the roadworks, you see lots of things happening. I haven't even got started yet. They genuinely haven't. We're at 2,000 people on site at the moment. At peak, it is still planned to be 8,000, and that's in 2030, 2031, I think. Unit 2 needs to be switched on by 2036. We've still got all of this time ahead of us. There is a lot of opportunity still to come. So yes, it is frustrating in these early days, but it will continue to get easier and easier and easier to engage. Question more on the quality side again. So from a company as an ISO 19443 accredited supplier and distribution of construction products, how do we best engage with Sizewell C and their contractors? I think there's an element I can try and answer that, but I don't know, Jainesh, Darcy, Alex, if you've got any take on that as a supplier that's already done the work to go 19443.
Yeah, so the best way, the question was, as the ISO 19443 accredited supplier, how they can better engage with Sizewell. So to be included in part of Sizewell C supply chain.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So there is a various option, like as we as a UK government initiative, we are encouraging more and more tier 2 supplier. For example, we are looking for local foundries. So we went to the local foundries like Sheffield Forge, Master, William Cook, various of them, audited them, and we are proposing some of this eligible UK-based tier 2 supplier to our tier 1 supplier, which are French-based supplier. So yeah, if they reach out to us, definitely we can support them to be part of directly of tier 1 of Sizewell C, or to be part of our tier 2 supplier through tier 1 supplier.
That's excellent. Thank you ever so much, Jainesh. And I think that the wider point, I think it kind of links to the previous 2 points as well. We're regularly trying to help those local businesses maybe that have prepared themselves, that have gone beyond, find the ways to introduce them to different parts of the project, to the different types of contractors. Again, there's been an element to date, the vast majority of the procurement has been Sizewell direct, the client. That will now transition. It will now go into the alliance, and the alliance, the Civils Alliance, I should say, will be the major contract holder for the next few years. And then later this year, the MEH Alliance, the Mechanical, Electrical and HVAC Alliance, will formally be in contract, and then they will begin their work. Now, huge amounts, particularly of the MEH Alliance, but also the Civil Alliance, is replicated. It has to be replicated conveniently for all the reasons you all understand. But it's all about how we then bring down the supply chain to those replicated tier one suppliers, those opportunities to local businesses such as yourselves, Mark. Right, we've got another question there. Could you provide a link to the previous webinars, please? I can't seem to find them. We will do. So what we'll do, Mark, when we send the thank you email, which include all the slides and the recording from today, we'll send a link to the previous ones. But if you're on our website, so on sizewellcsupplychain.co.uk, when you look at the support tab, you will see there is a few drop-down menus, and the second one on there, the Suffolk Chamber Supply Chain Engagement Business Support Programme. You will see all of the previous webinars that we have done on different subject matters. A lot of them are focused on individual bits like quality, like today, CFSI and so on. We've also done some on contracts, and like I said, some contract management stuff coming up. We've also done lots of the areas around social value, looking at how you can improve and prepare yourselves as best. As always, what we say with the essential standards, you as the businesses are the technical experts. We can't tell you how to deliver on what you're going to do. We also can't tell you what price to charge. The commercials are going to be down to you. But where we can support you and give you the heads up and a bit of extra help is around your corporate readiness and around your readiness around ESG, to ensure that when it comes to the pre-qualification questionnaire, that our aim is that you can sail through that as smoothly as possible and get to that invitation to tender stage where you can then really start to showcase what you can do and the sorts of prices you're going to charge. But yeah, we will make sure we share a link. But if in doubt, if you're on the website, if you look under support, you will find lots and lots of information there. We will give it a second in case anyone else has any other questions. As always, we don't mind. If we can't answer something, as you know, we will always come back with answers via email, and we'll always supply them to everyone as well. Oh, okay, I've got Spencer come back in. Thanks for answering the previous question. The meetings with Tier 1 contractors in 2 weeks' time. I can't see that on your website. Could I have more details on this, please? Yep. What we can ensure, so with the meeting that we've got the event we're holding in a couple of weeks, it's not on the website because the invites have gone out to the businesses and the sectors that the tier ones need. Again, there's no point wasting your time if you're a business that no one needs those services. So with every single tier one contractor that is exhibiting, we have worked very closely with them to look at their scheme of works for the next 12 to 18 months and understand the supply chain that they need to be speaking to. And then in theory, what we've then done is gone onto our database, and if you are of any level of relevance to what the tier ones need, then obviously we have invited you. What I would suggest, Spencer, and I'll put it in the chat in a second, please drop me an email. And I'm happy to then double check your business. We can see if you're of relevance, and if you are, then 100% be delighted to get you along as well. And if anyone else needs to check, then of course, please do, reach out to the team, and we can always make sure that you're being invited in the correct way to the right events, but also that we can make sure that the right events and the right support is available to you as well. As I say, we could invite all 3,000 people to every single event we do, but deep down, there is no point if there is no opportunity. What we want to ensure is we're inviting you at the right time to the right things, rather than wasting your time and obviously the tier one contractors' time. So yeah, anyway, please do drop me an email and we can have a look at that for you. I see in the chat, Ashley, tremendous name, from Sizewell, who actually helped speak on the CFSI webinar we did recently, has outlined, which is good, what we have previously stated as well, that it's not mandatory to have ISOs. I think we always describe it, as long as you have a robust management system in place, whether it's ISOs or some other areas as well, then you can work on Sizewell. The key is, if you don't have ISOs, you can 100% guarantee someone is going to come and inspect and look at what you're doing. It doesn't mean if you do have ISOs, they won't, But obviously ISOs by their nature are accredited. They showcase that you are not only having the paperwork, that you are delivering on those standards. So it is vitally important that if you don't need or want for your business to go to the level of certain levels of compliance, that you at least have those practices in place. And again, that's why I bring you back those essential standards that we've put on the portal. That is why they are so important, because you can answer those questions. And if I take the ISO 9001 question, for example, there are 3 levels of answer. There are, yes, I have ISO 9001. No, I don't have ISO 9001. Or no, I don't have 9001, but I do have an accredited, I forget the word, but practice in place, so that we can start to help understand what it is you need and where that support is. But as Ash has put on there, Sizewell has always said it does not want to put barriers in place where it doesn't need to. Fundamentally, this is a nuclear power plant, a £38 billion project on our coastline that is critical for UK security of energy. It needs to be delivered on time, on budget. So it needs the supply chain to be capable and suitably qualified to be able to deliver this. But where they can, they will always flex what's needed to ensure that those local businesses and those smaller businesses and new businesses into the industry have got the ability to play a part. Okay, right. Is there any other questions coming through? It doesn't look like there is. Now, as always, this isn't the end of it. You've got my email, you've got all the team's email. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions. If there's other webinar subjects that you would like to see, then obviously let us know. If I can have the next slide, please, because that will just summarize a couple that are coming up. So we've got 3 future business support program webinars on our website. So you'll see we're doing bid evaluation essentials. So rather than focusing all the time on how to write the best bid, we're actually looking at a webinar that's going to look at how those bids are evaluated in the nuclear sector and go linked to nationally significant infrastructure projects. Because actually sometimes if you can understand the answers, it helps you write the question. So we've got that in March. And then we've got 2 in April, one looking at psychological safety, especially on big projects like this, and then also one looking at contract controls. Very much contract management is a massive part of this as well. You're seen through paperwork and the need for records today, that actually managing your contracts is vitally important. But as we say, if there's other subjects that you would like to touch on, please do let us know. We have other events planned throughout the rest of the year, which will go public soon, which are very much going to look at some of the workshops we can do around some of these areas of essential standards and like some of the things you've heard today. So again, please do reach out. And if there is any other questions, then of course, we're always more than happy to answer any of them that we possibly can. So I will leave this for now. If you the next webinar we have is the All Supplier webinar, which is done with Malcolm Dare, the Commercial Director for Sizewell C. And that, I'm just scanning down, is on Wednesday, the 11th of March. Please feel free, sign up to that now on our website. And as I said earlier, as always, you'll also get the most up-to-date drone and photography footage of what's actually happening on site, as well as then key updates from the key senior personnel within the project. And I wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.